Hello, friends, and welcome to Weekly Witness, Texas Impact's weekly podcast designed to help mainstream Texans of faith understand the legislative process and to help you engage with the Texas legislature. My name is Scott Atnip, your host and Texas Impact's Director of Public Witness. And first, let me say that I hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving. These last few months have been hard. I know every time I turn on the news or social media, I'm reminded of how much work we have to do to create a more peaceful, just, and equitable society. We see conflict around the world, dysfunction in D.C., and a Texas legislature that just won't stop. But that's why it's especially important that we take a moment to rest, give thanks for life's blessings, and hopefully spend some time with friends and family. So I hope you had that opportunity this week. When you come back from that break, the Texas legislature will still be meeting in special session. We'll talk more about that in future weeks, and you can stay up to date by joining one of our teams at texasimpact.org. But today, we're excited to be joined by Texas Impact's Executive Director B. Moorhead and Climate Action Fellow Becca Edwards to discuss the upcoming COP28. For longtime listeners, you'll know that Texas Impact sends a team to attend the United Nations Climate Change Conference, or Conference of the Parties. The 28th conference will be November 30th until December 12th in Dubai. So I am excited for this week's conversation. Becca, B, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us here.
First, let's start out with, I guess, the obvious question. What is the COP? Tell us a little bit about what's happening and what to expect. And B, we'll start with you on this one.
Sure. So, and folks who are longtime listeners will remember that the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UNFCCC, they call it, is the process and architecture that was put in place in 1992, where all the nations of the world agreed to work collaboratively on addressing climate change. And so the COP, the Conference of the Parties, is the annual meeting where they get together and kind of see how they're doing and make plans for the future. In 2015 in Paris, the Paris Agreement was ratified or was written, and it sets the framework for all the work that's happened since then. So the Paris Agreement is the main thing everybody is kind of talking about now. It's not the only global agreement related to climate change, but it's the one that that all the action is most focused on at this point. So representatives from all the countries that are part of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which is all or almost all of them, will send representatives to this year Dubai, which is where COP28 is happening, the 28th annual meeting. And they'll be talking about how we're doing on climate change and what needs to happen over the next year, 5 years, 10 years to keep the world on track to avoid the worst impacts of climate change.
It is a 2-week conference. Talk to us some about what it actually looks like when you're there.
Well,
what's happening?
It's kind of amazing. It is people from all over the world, first of all. So it's just a milieu that most people don't mostly get to experience. It's really an honor to get to be with people, nonprofit advocates like us, scientists, representatives of local, state, and national governments, with all of their very different perspectives on the issue and also just on the world in general. It is amazing to get to be, for example, in line to get coffee like I was last year and chat with the person standing in line behind me and find out that they are a woman bank executive from a Middle Eastern country who can talk about the progress that she's made and seen in her lifetime, or the the Vietnamese monk that I met on the bus one time. It's an opportunity to learn about the world and all of our brothers and sisters and siblings and the experiences that they have. And that gives us a much richer understanding of why it's so important that here in the United States and specifically in Texas, that we have to do our part to keep the world livable for all of us.
Thanks for that. Becca, there's a lot of work that we hope comes out of this conference with some important outcomes. What are some of the biggest priorities in this year's COP?
One of the biggest priorities is the energy transition. So as you might know, carbon emissions from fossil fuel use for energy is one of the biggest drivers of climate change. And the world has made some significant progress on transitioning to lower emission forms of energy like wind and solar, but there's still lots of work left to do. So one of the biggest priorities is going to be talking to the parties about commitments they can make regarding the transition to cleaner forms of energy over the next period of time. A second priority is looking at methane. So methane is kind of an emerging focus in the fight against climate change. It's a gas that is more potent as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. It's emitted from some sort of different sources like natural gas recovery from landfills and from some agricultural sources. And so there's been some technological advances recently that allow us to see better where methane is coming from so that we can start reducing those emissions. It's one of the most effective ways we can affect climate change in the near term. So energy transition to cleaner forms of electrical generation, cleaner forms of transportation, as well as methane. Those will be the big priorities energy-wise this year.
Love it. And B, any other priorities that you'll be watching for?
The big priority that I'm going to be watching for is all things to do with finance. So when Becca talks about energy transition and we're talking about technical solutions to different aspects of climate change, the thing that underpins all of those is money. It's where the countries and corporations and individuals spend their money and what we choose to invest in and not invest in. It's also how we prioritize spending money on impacts that are already happening. So the issue of finance, climate finance isn't just like one checking account that is called climate finance. It's actually a lot of different nested sources of spending and sometimes sources of revenue that all go together.
Becca, many of our listeners will have seen reports last month of the first ever global stocktake report being released. What is that report and what did it say about the global community's progress on climate change?
So the global stocktake report is the result of the original Paris Agreement stipulated that countries would report on their progress towards their individually determined contributions, which is their goals towards reducing their emissions and taking other measures to combat climate change. So the global stocktake report is each country's report on their own progress. So what the stocktake report found this time is that we have made some progress that is needed, but ultimately we are not where we need to be in terms of limiting global temperature change to 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is the goal set forth in the Paris Agreement. It's important to note that the stocktake says it is still possible to reach this goal, but that the current nationally determined contributions that we have will not get us to that goal. If we continue with the status quo, we're not going to make the goal of 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming. But the good news is that given the technology we have available, if we have the political will to reduce our emissions even further, that we should still be able to make that goal. So the global stocktake report is a good time to check in and reevaluate what our priorities are, set some more ambitious goals going forward, and that'll be an important part of the conversation this year at COP.
I assume that should be taken as like a kick in the pants to folks who are listening and people around the world that we still have significant work to do.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
All right. B, one of the big terms or concepts that we'll be hearing a lot about over the course of the next few weeks as people pay attention to this conference and you all report back is loss and damage. So can you remind us what we're talking about in terms of loss and damage and why it's so important, especially to faith communities?
Sure. So loss and damage is a term that took a long time to sort of gain traction in the UNFCCC space at the COPs. People are probably familiar with the idea of adaptation. So adaptation is all of the things that communities and countries are doing to prepare themselves to get ready for impacts of climate change that we won't be able to prevent from happening, at least for some amount of time. And there's been a lot of focus on adaptation over the years. But as natural disasters ramp up and as the impacts of climate change have been felt more and more, especially, say, in the last 10 years, it's increasingly clear that there are some impacts of climate change that are not adaptable. We can't adapt to them. They're already happening, and they're causing real problems right now. So loss and damage refers to the inescapable, already happening aspects of climate change. And specifically, loss and damage is a finance issue. It is a question about what the world is going to do for the most vulnerable, at most marginalized people and places where they can't recover from loss and damage. If you think about loss and damage in the context of, for example, Hurricane Harvey, lots of loss and damage, lots of damage, including irreparable damage, right? So the permanent loss of people's homes, they maybe can be rebuilt, but not in the same place. You'll remember during Hurricane Harvey, I think we had a synagogue where their books were flooded, and so they lost a bunch of stuff. That's not just a loss in economic terms, that's a loss in cultural terms as well, for example. So in the United States, we have insurance, we have, a lot of resources sort of generally available, and we can talk about how inequitably we distribute those resources or how hard it is or whether we should be insuring certain kinds of things or not. But we do have systems in place. In some parts of the world, big parts of the world, there's no system in place. There's no funding available. There's no way to make people, it's not even a question of making them whole. It's making the situation survivable. So at the COP last year at the COP, there was a decision to establish a fund for loss and damage, a fund that would presumably be paid into globally by entities that would have that responsibility, that would be distributed out to people and countries that have loss and damage who need that financial support. This year, the big ticket item is to vote to establish that fund that has been in the process of being created or envisioned all year by a committee, and to figure out how to get money into it. So it's kind of the big moment on the big stage for this issue, and we're going to see if the countries of the world that do have resources, including and probably kind of especially the United States, are going to be able to literally put our money where our mouths are about this is a global community and we have to take care of each other.
I assume that'll be focused on state actors, but is it going to be a thing where like I could send my $20 to a fund? Or
well, we'll see, won't we? And it's going to be one of the things that the faith community has advocated for is certainly it should be the responsibility of countries that are rich in financial resources like the United States to put money into such a fund. But, in our view, it should in no way be limited. Your $20, that's kind, Scott. And the world appreciates it. We're probably looking for a few more zeros than that in general.
I would assume so.
So I think we are going to be talking about whether private philanthropy, corporate donors, if entities like that are able to put money in.
Right. So speaking of the role of the faith community, Texas Impact and many of our denominational partners, faith partners, will be represented at the COP. What is the role that you all, that the communities of faith, play in these negotiations?
So, Scott, I'm going as part of the United Methodist delegation through my role at the General Board of Church and Society. And so what we're doing denominationally is thinks about global problems like climate change from the perspective of the denomination's social principles. So the way we look at a problem like climate change through a lens of faith is thinking about like the call in the Gospels to care for our neighbor, the call to care for the least and the marginalized. So one of the roles that we'll play at COP is to think in those terms about the negotiations and about the decisions that are being made, to be able to think about the scope and the scale of the problem from the perspective of caring for our neighbors and caring for people all around the world. So a big part of the role the faith community plays is to keep the focus on human lives and the health of the people, the world, so that it supports creation in the best way possible.
That's true. And I will say, and Becca is also going as part of the Texas Impact delegation. So she's got kind of two hats. Yes, two hats. So that's right. The faith community's job is largely to keep the focus on the connection between faith, social principles, and the activity of governments. It's also there as a key connector between this global process, which can seem really conceptual and unrelated to people's kind of daily lived experience, and the work that we do in our local communities. So it's one of the jobs of organizations either like Texas Impact or like the denominational bodies that go to interpret what's happening in the global space for people in communities throughout the United States so that they can be effective advocates in the domestic processes that have to happen for the United States to be a climate leader. So thinking about loss and damage in particular, the role of the faith community is going to be really important post-COP when Congress will need to appropriate money for the United States to put into loss and damage fund, assuming that we're able to get to that point, which I believe and hope that we will. So one of our jobs is to help faith communities here in Texas understand what's at stake, understand the mechanics, why we think this fund is robust and necessary, and then help them take those concrete advocacy steps with elected officials that they are constituents of.
I just want to applaud myself for not taking the bait when Becca mentioned two hats, one being the United Methodist Church and the other being Texas Impact, that I didn't say anything about not wearing a Texas Tech hat this week with the football game. But moving on, there are a lot of folks who want to keep up over the course of the next few weeks. What can we do to stay aware of what's happening at the COP?
So Texas Impact will be there with not only delegations like the United Methodist Church and the Presbyterian Church USA, which will have a delegation there, but also with Interfaith Power and Light and other interfaith colleagues, and all of us will be working together to put out information and videos and blog posts. So one thing everyone can and should do is to follow Texas Impact on all the social media and watch our website. But also, we'll be collaborating with Interfaith Power and Light to put information on their special COP roundup page. And also, Texas Impact, for the third or fourth time, will be partnering with the Austin Chronicle, which is the local alternative weekly paper here in Austin. We'll be sending video clips back to the Chronicle. So for folks, actually for anyone anywhere, because it's a website, they'll be able to go to the Austin Chronicle to see highlights of our work there as well.
All right, last question, and I know y'all are excited for this one. There are some commentators who've said that it's too late to do anything about climate change, so we should just focus on supporting each other through the inevitable impacts. What say you to that? Is it too late?
No!
No, I've heard that from a couple of different places, and it's disappointing every time I hear it. So listen, we in the United States have really dragged our feet on making progress on both our emissions and other sources of energy. And what we know is that we have the technology to make this transition. So to stop trying now is just not an acceptable solution to me. And it's especially offensive to people living in the global South who are dealing with some very real impacts of climate change to look at a country with as many resources as the U.S., unable to generate the political will to make progress on this issue. So I feel like we have a real responsibility to make as much progress as we can, and it's not time to give up yet.
Amen.
Becca saved the sermon for the end like that. I did say last question on the last one, but any other closing thoughts or shameless plugs you want to leave our listeners with today?
Oh, shameless plug is everybody should read The Ministry for the Future by Kim Stanley Robinson. This is a book that came out during COVID. It probably didn't get quite the attention it would have if it had come out when we weren't all locked in our houses. It is a genre of fiction that's emerging called cli-fi, which means climate fiction. But it is a really well-researched and comprehensively thought through imagining of what the next 50 years could be like, that will leave people feeling like we're probably going to hit some bumps in the road. And also, just as Becca says, it is not too late to make progress, and shame on us if we can't figure out how to get the political will to do that.
All right. Becca, thank you so much for the time today, and really appreciate your willingness not just to take the time to do this podcast, but to take the time to do the important work that's going to take place over the course of the next few weeks. Safe travels to you both, and we'll look forward to hearing from you when you get back about all the incredible work you were able to be a part of.
Thanks.
So thanks again.
Thanks.
I hope you enjoyed this week's conversation with B. Moorhead and Becca Edwards. Remember to keep an eye on TexasImpact.org and Texas Impact social media for reports from the COP. Y'all, there's going to be a lot of climate information and challenges in the next few weeks. There is hope, but it will take all of us doing the work. So I hope you're tuned in and paying attention and sharing the information with your networks. As we close out this episode today, I would remind you that the Texas legislature is still meeting in what seems like perpetual sessions, and there are many ways that you can get plugged in. So far, 4,000 Texans of faith have signed Texas Impact's Public Dollars for Public Schools letter, and those have been delivered to the Capitol. Now, Texans of faith are protesting in the streets at the district offices of their Texas representatives. Keep it going. Your representatives need to know that Texans of faith support public schools. We'll talk more about that in future episodes, but make sure to keep an eye on TexasImpact.org to find out how you can get involved. While you're there, I hope you'll consider joining Texas Impact to support this podcast and the work of Texas Impact year-round. You can also reach out to me directly at scott@texasimpact.org with questions. So with that, I think it's time to close out this episode. So remember, the world needs Texans of faith active and engaged. So let's get to work.
Weekly Witness is hosted by Scott Atnet, engineered and produced by David Fasalo. Our executive producer is B. Moorhead. The opinions expressed on Weekly Witness are those of Texas Impact and our guests, and do not necessarily reflect the views of our sponsors. Weekly Witness is a product of Texas Impact, people of faith working for justice. Visit us online at texasimpact.org.